Hello, 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 and welcome to the Healing Half. My name is Miki Speer. I am a musician, author, talk show host, and daughter-in-law of tonight's amazing guest, Tammy Speer, who is here to talk about a topic I hope none of you can relate to, which is losing a child. And I'll let her introduce herself and her tragic but amazing, beautiful, horrible story at the same time. But if you are here, whether you're watching it live or as a replay, let me know in the comments section. I want to know who's here. I want you to say hi to Tammy if you know her. We just love to go back through and read who's able to watch the short half-hour show where we get to learn all about healing, growth, how we can heal our own wounds. So if you have lost a child, which I so hope you haven't, but if you have, my prayer is that you are going to hear Tammy's story tonight and you are going to know you are not alone and you're going to hear things and you're going to be like, yep, yep, yep. That's my prayer for that group. And then for those of us who haven't lost a child, my hope and my prayer, as with every show, is that we are going to learn insights on a little bit, the best that we can, on what it's like, what as a community we can do to help, and what as a community we do that maybe isn't so helpful that we think is helpful, because we all want to be good community members. We all want to know how to love people better. But when we are unsure of what to say, of what to do, unfortunately, life gets kind of busy and we end up not doing anything. And then time goes on and you're like, oh, it's probably too late. I don't want to bring it back up. And so you end up not doing anything. And so that's the whole point of this show, is I wanted to have a space where we as a community can learn together, have a healing half hour, as the show title goes, and really, really build up our knowledge as a community so how we can help others. And for those of you who don't know me, I am a musician, and so I might play a song for you later. We'll see if we have time. My mom died when I was 13 years old from cancer, and I spent the better part of a decade avoiding feeling, pretending I was fine, and convincing myself that it's not a big deal. I'm strong enough. All those lies, you know the ones. Well, as you know, the only way through grief is through grief, and it sucks. And eventually I had a bunch of things just crumbling around me, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. Why am I crying all the time? Why are my thoughts super scattered? Why can't I focus? And all the doctors were not coming up with anything. There was nothing diagnosable about it until somebody asked about my past, and they realized, wait a second, you had a huge trauma. Have you processed that? And of course, I hadn't at that point. And it was until then that I hadn't really processed it. But then I started counseling and I started reading and I started talking about my loss. And through that process, I realized how utterly healing it is to go through emotions, even though it sucks and it's painful. But that's why I wanted to start the show, to just encourage all of us to lean into those hard emotions. And we're going to talk more about this later. But if you want help with that, My Heart Still Remembers is my workbook that I wrote, now knowing what I know now about grief, and when I need to process, when I need to connect with my past, when I need to tackle some hard emotions, I go straight to that. So if you haven't yet, head to my website, which is in the comment section. Sign up for my email list. I'll make sure to send the replay of this, both the Facebook link and the YouTube link, so you can send it to your friends who aren't on Facebook, as well as the links to My Heart Still Remembers and some new music I have coming out. So be sure to join me on my email list. I am just really excited to be able to share those just weekly emails. I promise it's not spammy. That will have a packed full of information and the highlights of tonight's show. So without further ado, I want to welcome my amazing, beautiful, powerful, strong mother-in-law, Tammy.
Hi.
Hey, Tammy, how are you?
I'm doing okay, thanks. It's good to be here.
Yes, we are so grateful to have you here. You and I have been talking about having you on the show for a while, and today of all days just solidified. We got to do this. We have to talk about Brendan today. And I'll kind of just maybe pass it over to you. Do you want to maybe talk about what day it is today, and just kind of the intro of your story?
Yeah, of course. Well, thanks for having me here. Today, January 19th, is my son Brendan's 25th birthday. So it's a hard day. It's a day that we should be celebrating with him, and we're not. So we celebrate for him. I guess after the first year, I decided that I was going to celebrate his birthday and not spend it in complete sadness, because the day of his birth was awesome and he came into our world, and that kind of became our focus for this day. So we always pick a movie that Brendan would like, and Brendan was a movie buff. He loved movies. So we always go and we pick one we know he would like, and we go. And usually my parents come with us, but today the weather worked against us and they hit really bad icy roads, so they had to turn around. But normally it's them and Logan and Mark and I, because his death day is sad, and we spend his death day in tears a lot more than we do on his birthday. So we do things to honor him. Like tonight, we went to the funeral, the cemetery after the movie, and we spread a bunch of granola bars all around his plot, because he's an animal lover. So we feed the squirrels and the deers and all the wildlife, and it just makes us feel good to know that we're doing something he would like. But
Awesome.
yeah. But to give you a little background, Brendan, who is the one in the baseball hat in the picture, Brendan was 6'4". He was a gentle giant. He just filled life. He loved just adventure, and he was born with a gleam in his eye, and that gleam just kept growing. He thrived on scaring everybody with his antics and picking sports that were rough and horrifying to watch, but it was him, and that's who he was. But he was in college. He was a freshman at the University of Montana. He was all about being a cop. He was really into justice and black and white and helping people. He would be the guy that stopped on the side of the road to help somebody or some animal. I lost count of how many times he would come home and tell me what he'd done, and I'd be like, no. But that's who he was, and he just was doing really well. But on Sunday, March 15th of 2015, about 9:00 that night, I had gone upstairs to get ready to go to bed and wait for him to call, because he usually called on Sunday nights. So I thought, I'll get ready and then talk to him. And Mark came up and said there was somebody at the door. The police were here. And my stomach immediately fell. In hindsight, I don't know how I knew, but I knew. And so I didn't want to go downstairs. I thought, if I just stay upstairs, it won't be true. And my husband, he said, no, I think something happened on the cul-de-sac. So we walked over to the stairs, and I just remember looking down the stairs and seeing 3 people standing there, 2 in uniform. So we knew they were cops, and they wouldn't look at me. They wouldn't meet my eye. They wouldn't, they just had that look. And I walked about halfway down, and I said Brendan's name. The policewoman turned away, and the policeman looked up and just said, "Why do you ask?" And I said, well, we haven't heard from him yet today. And we got to the bottom, and he basically said, we're sorry, but the Missoula police called to have us come make a notification that your son has passed away. And at first he said, called about your son. And my husband said, okay, was he in an accident? Is he okay? And I immediately had fallen to the floor and was crying. And I'm like, no, he's dead. He's gone. And the policeman said, I'm still sorry, but yes, he's passed away. And so I don't remember a lot of the moments right after that, because Mark and I just started hysterically sobbing. And then eventually they kind of got us up and took us to the living room. And we were told that he had passed away in his dorm room and that they wanted to go downstairs with us because Sean, my older son, was home for spring break, and he and my younger son Logan were downstairs waiting for us. So we walked downstairs, told the boys, and dealt with that. And I will say that the hardest day in my entire life was the day that we buried Brendan. But the second hardest day was telling his brothers that they had lost that Brendan had died. That stays with me. But we walked upstairs. The police connected us with the police in Montana. And so we kind of dealt with all that communication issue. And it was probably 45 minutes to an hour later that we discovered it was suicide. And called my parents and his family and my brother. I called my brother and he brought my parents immediately. So an hour later, breaking some speed traps, I'm sure, they showed up. So from the moment that we called, we had people. So our support system was amazing. And I thank God for that. But Brendan died by suicide. And it was awful. It was horrifying.
Oh my gosh, I'm over here sobbing. Obviously, for those of you who don't know, I am married to Tammy's oldest son, Sean, and I remember, not to make this about me, I remember texting Sean that day, that night, and he was just like, the police are here, it's weird. And I was like, what happened? And it took a while for him to respond, and that's when I knew something was wrong. And then he said, Brendan's gone. And I was like, what do you mean Brendan's gone? Like, it was like,
gone where?
Yeah, gone where? Gone to Hawaii? Gone? What? Like, it was just so, like you said, it was unfathomable. Like, we're not having this conversation. And then Sean had to repeat, like, no, like, he's dead. And that was just like, what do you say? So I am sobbing over here. Thank you so much for sharing it. For everybody listening, it's so great to hear you. I love all of your comments. So thank you so much. Keep them coming, whether you're watching live or as a replay. But I just want you to know, we really, in this Speer family, value talking about suicide. And we really think it's super important we talk about it. So we are going to have Tammy back on soon. And we're going to talk more about that. So put that little thing in, just like put a pin in it. We're going to circle back to that in a couple of weeks, because that's another conversation that's very much worth having. But tonight, I think we're going to keep focusing on just the death of losing a child, of which I still like. I wish I could just hug you through the screen, because in a way, it's still not real. So, mind kind of walking us just kind of through what happened next?
Oh, the shocking thing about a death, whether it's a child or a spouse or a sibling, whatever, is how quickly you have to make decisions. So I called my brother and he brought my parents. And in the meantime, because it takes an hour for them, they start saying, oh, and the third guy turned out to be a chaplain, which I did not like, and I was not impressed. And he immediately was like, okay, what church do you go to? Who's your pastor? Where do you want his body to come to? What funeral home do you want to use? And I'm looking at him going, F you. I'm sorry, my son is gone and I have to process this, but they don't allow that. And so that was really hard. That was really hard. And then trying to deal with Sean and Logan, who, God bless them, took care of me, because I ended up going outside screaming. And of course, all the neighbors come out and they're like, what's going on? What's going on? And Logan, who was only 15 at the time, or 16 at the time, had to go explain to the neighbors why I was in the middle of the night. Because by now it's like 10 o'clock, 10:30. And I'm out there screaming, no, it's not fair. I'm mad at the world. And I don't remember being pulled up. I don't remember them lifting me off the ground to come inside. And I do remember when we heard my brother's truck and my mom and dad coming. And mom jumping out of the truck. And my mom is very short, so watching her jump out of the truck should be hilarious. But it was horrifying to have her hit the ground going, what's happened? What's happened? Because my brother hadn't really told them. And I said, Brendan died, Brendan. And I just remember sort of collapsing into them. Oh, sorry. Because it just was unreal. And you always think when you hear stories or watch shows or whatever that it happens to other people. You don't ever consider it happening to you. And that was an interesting light bulb that went off in my head, like, oh shoot, we're those people now. And I will forever be known as, oh, that's Tammy. She's the one, who lost her son to suicide. And I hear that, and you see the whispers, and that's hard. Um, but I just remember being surrounded by family, and I remember my pastor. We have an amazing pastor at our church, and I didn't know him well. He was fairly new, and we weren't go to church every Sunday people. Um, he walked in, and I was really mad. Like, he walked in, and I'm like, "What are you doing here? Like, leave." And he's like, "I'm just here if you need anything." And I'm like, "I don't." And I walked away. And he sat with family by then. He was just chatting. And I remember at one point I was sitting on the couch crying with my sister-in-law, Cheryl, and my mom. And I became very aware that he was sitting on the corner seat next to me. And I remember I finally looked at him and just said, "Just tell me my son's in heaven." And he got down on his knees. I'll never forget it. I got down on his knees, he took my hands, and he said, "God had Brendan in his arms before he took his last breath." And I came back with, "But he died by suicide. He committed suicide." And you will not hear me use the word committed suicide, because he didn't commit anything. He died by suicide. But on that day I did. And he said, "Doesn't matter. He was part of God's family, and God has him." And that became really crucial for me to hold on to that. And surprisingly, the next day, as people started finding out, one of our good college friends sent a link to a song on YouTube called "Jealous of the Angels." And that became kind of my anthem. Like, I'm jealous of the angels, you're sitting at the throne. And it was just heartwarming to hear that song and know that that's where Brendan was, because everything else had gone to hell. So we planned the funeral. We had to wait several days for them to transfer the body, which was really heart-wrenching. And we were able to go see him when he got into town. You were there, and we had our private moment with him. And I just remember I couldn't touch him enough. I couldn't stop touching him. I couldn't stop stroking his beard, all the things I used to love about when he was around. And then the funeral came, and we had hundreds and hundreds of people, and they were really, really good to us. But it's just surreal. There's unsurreal part of it. Like, you're so happy they're there, but you're so angry that you need to be there. It's a weird. Somebody asked me once, "What does it feel like? Like, what are those moments?" And I'm like, it feels like walking through quicksand in the dead of night, where you can't see anything, you can't hear anything, and you can barely move. Everything is so heavy. It's just, you're being pulled down. It's like you've got anchors tied all around you, and moving becomes difficult. And that lasted a long, long time. Like, there's still days where it feels like that, but they're not as often, but it takes a long time. Everybody says, "Oh, the first year." Yeah, the first year. It's the first year, and then it's the second year, which to me is far worse, because now you're not numb anymore. The shock has worn off, and the reality starts to set in, because it's really easy to have a phone ring and think, "Oh, it's Brendan." Oh yeah, no, it's not. So that second year, those expectations start to dwindle, and people stop being there. That's a huge, huge awakening, to find out that, within a couple of weeks, some people go back to their lives, and you're still not. So I don't wish it on anyone. I know there's a ton of people that have lost one child, two children. I don't wish that's not like your worst enemy. That's not something I wish on anyone. There's no pain. There's just no pain that matches it. You know, Sean, and Logan are the only humans on earth that have heard my heartbeat from the inside. And one of those is gone. And so my heart changed. My heartbeat changed. You know, it has a lot of physical, emotional. It's not just physical, it's not just emotional, it's everything. Everything changes.
There are a billion questions I want to ask, but I guess I'll just start by saying thank you for being so vulnerable. Thank you for being so honest. I remember leaving the funeral. Do you mind sharing just a little bit about how you found the strength to leave that night once the crowds went away?
At the cemetery, I remember kind of collapsing on the casket before they lowered it. I remember my friend Wendy coming up and just putting her arm around me and laying there with me, and thinking I can't leave. Like, this is the last time I'll be able to physically touch something. It was excruciating. And honestly, I don't know where that strength came from. The number one thing that's gone through my head every day since is I have 2 other children, and they deserve a mom. They deserve me to be their mom and not look back and say, well, I lost my brother and I lost my mom too. Like, that was something that was never going to happen. So that's a driving force for me to be there for them always. And it gives you strength. You know, you hear stories of women that lift cars off their kids. You do anything for your kids. And I will fight to the death to make sure that I find joy in life because they deserve that. And Brendan would want that. So a lot of it is, what would Brendan do? You know, how would Brendan react? And that pushes me forward. Like today, you know, it sounded like such a great idea to do this on his birthday until today came. And then it didn't sound like such a great idea anymore. And there was a moment where I kind of was like, nope, can't do this. I quit. And then I thought, no, Brendan would want this. He would want people to know that we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. And we are. We are okay. And we have lots of fun as a family. And I have true joy in my life. But there's always that thing sitting on my shoulder. You know, where Brendan should be. And so there's always that darkness. There's always darkness, but it doesn't stop you from living. It shouldn't stop you from living. So that's how I left is that. And my family being there, you know, they were there.
Wow. I love you. That's all I can say right now as I'm going here sobbing. I love you so much.
I love you too.
I kind of want to transition now, and I think we're just gonna have to have you back on the show a bunch of times because I want to ask you 40,000 questions. But you kind of mentioned it earlier. There's a motherhood component that you cannot describe to somebody who does not have kids. You know, you just can't describe it because it's indescribable. Mm-hmm. I guess. And I know, like you said, it's it's a journey that never ends. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. I loved your 2-year thing because I have felt that in my own life. The first year, you can almost convince yourself they're on vacation. Yep. Like, oh, they're just gone this holiday, or they're just busy. But then the second year, it's bam. That's when you're like, oh my gosh, like this is the second Christmas. This is the second birthday. What did people do that helped you? And you're like, wow, thank God they did this.
They showed up. Number one, they showed up. They listened. And surprisingly, it's not always your closest friends that show up. It's those distant friends. Like, you're friends with them, but you know, you don't really do a lot with them. And we had one couple that was very important to Brendan, real involved with Boy Scouts with him. And they really stepped up. They called, they texted, they brought meals. They were crucial to our healing, I think, because they always remember. Like, even today, I haven't talked to her in months because of COVID. And she was the first text I got this morning. And that means more than anything, that people remember. You know, people did bring meals. I had one friend, there was a party, and I'm like, nope, I'm not going. Mark went. And my girlfriend showed up at the door and she's like, come on. And I'm like, no. And, some people are like, oh, she should have forced you. But I said, no, I really just can't. And she was okay with that. Like she's like, okay, and she left. And that was important. Like she could have stayed. But it was more important for her to listen to me and to accept my decision instead of forcing what she thought was best for me. Because people think, oh, get busy, do this, do that. It's like, I need to just cry. Like being around people, that's not where I want to be. And I'm not a big party person anyway, and I've become even less so since. But that was huge, just having people not just show up, but really listen and remember Brendan and share stories. We had some friends of Brendan's, their parents come and just share stories that we hadn't heard before. And that was really big, really big. So showing up, just show up, just listen. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. Just be there. Like, show up. It doesn't take much. It's free.
Yeah.
It's free. And it means the world for people to show up and to share.
I think it's a beautiful way for people to let you or whoever is grieving know we haven't forgotten.
Yes.
Because, your world is crumbling and it was shattered. And one of my favorite metaphors is it's not shattered, it's dust. It cannot be put back together in the way that it was before. So it's dust, it's decimated.
Yep.
And yet the world moves on. The world moves on. And then you feel so lonely
Yeah.
in that moment, once like you said, once the meals kind of stop and it's like, does anybody remember this massive, my heart was ripped out. Does anybody care?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such a good lesson for all of us. So for those of you listening, put it on your mental note. I'll make sure I put it in the email too. Put it on your calendar, like every month for 3 years, like literally just send a text and check in and let them know you haven't forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's so valuable. And I'm sure a billion other things you'd like to add to that.
One of the things, I have an aunt and uncle. My uncle Terry lost his wife when he was a young father. And him and his current wife, every month we got a package with a poem, a card, something about Brendan. And it was just every month to get that package and know they still remembered. Like they knew that it didn't just go away. For everybody else, the sun came up in the morning. For us, it didn't. I think it was 2-3 years before Mark and I slept through the night. We just didn't sleep through the night. It just wasn't a part of our lives anymore. Now I sleep for the most part until like a week ago, because usually about 2 weeks before any event, I stop sleeping and don't feel good. And sometimes I don't understand why. It's my body remembering before my mind does. Like, I'll go 3 or 4 days where I'm not sleeping good and I don't feel good. And all of a sudden I'll be like, oh, his birthday's coming, or his death day's coming, or Thanksgiving's coming, those kind of things. But yeah, I think it's important for people to not be afraid to reach out. People are so afraid of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. The worst thing they can do is ignore us. That really is the worst thing they can do. So just remember.
I love that. And I guess it kind of leads us to the question of, if those were helpful, and I know you've got a couple stories because I've heard them. I've already heard some of these. They're so good. What were things that people did in addition to the silence? Because you're right, a silence is an action within itself, right? Yeah. In addition to the silence, what did people do where you're just like, ooh, cringy, please don't. Please don't.
Number one, just be thankful you still have 2 children. Like, just be so thankful you still have 2 children. And I would be like, which one do you want to give up? Like, which one are you willing to say goodbye to? Because that's not helpful. And we did get that. Like, it's crazy, but that was comments people said, and they thought they were being helpful. And there was another one. I remember I was at Walgreens actually, and a friend came up, and she's like, oh, I was so sorry to hear about Brendan. I'm just so sad that he's in hell. And I was like, what? And she's like, well, he committed suicide, so he's going to burn in hell. And I was not in a good place at that point, and I can be not the most diplomatic person in the world sometimes.
You shouldn't have to be diplomatic in
Um,
that situation.
but
Holy
she
cow.
caught me so off guard, and I was crying right away. And I looked at her, I said, well, I guess he's in good company with your sister, which is not the proper thing to respond. I know that now. And she was furious. She's like, my sister died by cancer. And I'm like, yeah, but she stopped treatment. She refused to have any more treatment. So she allowed herself to die. How is that not suicide? And she stormed out. And about 2 weeks later, she called and she apologized. And I apologized. But I said, you hit that, like, don't you say anything negative about my kid. Like, don't you say that. I need to know he's in heaven. Like, I need to know that I'm going to see him one day and hold him again. And it hit that mom chord again, and I was already dealing with so much guilt. So much guilt.
I know you're not going to share names, but virtual slap, that's so inappropriate.
Yeah. So those were hurtful. Other things that were hurtful were people that, would go out of their way to, like, say they were having a party for this or doing this and either excluding us or like, well, we assume you wouldn't want to come, given what happened. And it's like, you're right, but ew,
I'd still like to invite.
Yeah. And then people, for the most part, we didn't have a lot of horrible comments, but just some things like, aren't you over it yet? Like, Tammy, it's been months. You're still crying all the time. Like, you never want to go anywhere. You never want to do anything. Like, you're right. I don't. And that's a huge thing. People think you should be better. Like, the funeral's over, move on. And that was not the case. There is no moving on right then and there. It takes a long time. Grief is hard. You have to really push. And we weren't ready to push at that point. So those were hurtful comments, getting over it. Why do you always post? That was one thing. Why do you always post pictures of Brendan on Facebook? It's, he's dead. I'm like, well, yeah, but he's still my kid, So I kind of got angry at that one and started posting more for a little bit. Like, if you can post pictures of your child, I get that your child's still alive, but this is all I've got. The pictures I have are all I've got, so I want to share them. And so I do, and Facebook became kind of like a journal for me. I don't expect sympathy. I don't expect comments. I just post it for me. And honestly, I love the memories when they come up, and it reminds me, not that I forget, but it's just like, okay.
Yeah. So. Oh my gosh. There's a trillion other questions I have, but we are running out of time. So let's just put it on our calendar. So everybody here, follow the page, get on my email list, because we are absolutely going to have Tammy back. And if you want to have Tammy back on the show, give me an amen or a yes in the comment section. We want Tammy. We want Tammy. I am over here sobbing, but I want people. I get the absolute pleasure and honor of my life to have you as my mother-in-law. So I get to have access to you all the time. But I want everybody on the call to know, and we'll talk more maybe on another show about how you've channeled your pain to helping other people. But can you tell others who are listening right now or as a replay, how they can get in touch with you, what you kind of do to help other grievers, and just kind of give, why someone should reach out to you afterwards?
Okay, well, real quick, shortly, I would guess maybe a year after, less than a year, pretty close, I guess. Somebody brought to attention a guy named Alan Wolfelt. And Alan Wolfelt's a renowned expert in grief. He has workshops in Colorado. And I got online and I saw, oh, okay, they're really expensive. But I decided I was going to sign up for one. So, and unfortunately, the first one I went to was Understanding Your Suicide Grief. And it was 1 month short of a year. And I went to this workshop, and it's 4 very intense days, 4 very long, intense days. I went to that, and I used it as it became therapy. I thought I was going there to learn how to help other people. No, I learned how to help myself. And that led to another class, and then that led to another class. And so if you take 5 weeks of his trainings, you get certified as a grief companion, like a facilitator. And I did that. It took a little while, but I did that, and I started facilitating. So I lead grief groups. Suicide is my passion, but I do all kinds of grief. And then this summer, actually, in 2020, I signed up for a class at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I became a grief support specialist. So I want to turn that into something in the future, but right now it's just kind of like volunteer work. And it's been great. Helping people fills you up. It sounds.
Oops, Tammy, are you frozen for a second? Oh no. Well, Tammy, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I'm not sure if I froze or you froze, but you keep going. Keep going.
Well, basically, I just think it's important to use your pain for good, so I help others and hope that I can give them some small comfort, because I found so much comfort in my grief group, and now I lead them. So yeah, I'm anyone that feels the need. It's so hard to open yourself up. It's so hard to be vulnerable. The number one thing is you have to face your reality, and then you have to embrace your pain. If you don't make friends with your pain, you're not going anywhere. Like you've mentioned before, you can't run from it. You can't hide from it. It will come. It will catch you. So anyone that wants to talk is free to contact me. Miki will give you my email. I'm on Facebook as well. So definitely reach out. It's so comforting to talk to people that have been there and done that. To have that community is very important. Our culture is not good at grief. We kind of suck at dealing with sadness and grief. But it's through people that facilitate and are okay to talk about it, like you and your show, opening that up. It's important.
Thank you, Tammy. I so appreciate it. And her email is in the comments. You guys reach out if you know people. We all, unfortunately, will meet people who lose children. And it's so, hopefully we've got some nuggets tonight to take with us about being there and not being silent and, not being afraid to say the wrong thing and just do something. But you could also pass along Tammy's email. You could reach out to Tammy and say, hey, my best friend just lost a child. What do I do? Reach out. I send everybody to Tammy. I'm like, you need to talk to my mother-in-law. So thank you so much for being on the show. And before we go, Tammy's one of my, again, if you guys haven't been able to tell by now, she's one of my favorite people of all time. We've got this book, My Heart Still Remembers. Tammy, I'm gonna put the thing in the comment section, but do you mind just sharing your experience super fast with this grief book that I wrote? Because you were one of my inspirations with on my own journey too, but why this was so important.
Well, it goes to what I said, befriending your pain and facing your reality. And that book is such a gentle way of remembering and working through all of those facets of grief, because it's not just physical, it's not just emotional. There's the taste of it, the smell, and just working through it. So I hand it out a lot. I've given it to a lot of people because it's such a gentle way to work through that pain. And you have to work through it. You have to confront it. And by confronting it, it starts to ease. It's never going to go away. Don't kid yourself. It's never going to go away, but it does soften. And the waves come less frequently, and they don't come as high. They don't take you under. And that book is just a great, great way to work that into your life. And don't just do it one time. Doing it a few months in, and then maybe a year later doing it again, because you change. Your grief changes, and you might think of something a year later that you didn't think of before. So it's a fabulous book. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it. And not just
oh my gosh. I was like, I can't pass up an opportunity to have you talk about it. So thank you so much for being on the show, for being such a supporter of my book. That's my prayer, you guys, is with this show, with this book, with my music. So I'm on Spotify. I've got a song coming out about Light a Candle. And I've got so many songs. Tammy's my muse, I think, half the time, because I wrote See Me for Her, which is on Spotify. And it was influenced by a lot, but it was specifically a gift for Tammy. And then Light a Candle was also inspired by Tammy's amazing candle lighting ceremony that she introduced me to. And that's coming out in a couple weeks. So my prayer is that this show, the music, the book, the guests, like my amazing mother-in-law, help us all heal ourselves, be inspired to keep going with our own healing, as well as know more about how to help others. And Tammy, you delivered beyond anything I can comprehend. So thank you so much for being here. We'll have you back in a month or two, and we're going to pick up right where we left off. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Bye. Love you so
Bye.
much.
Love you too. Bye, everyone.